All right, so hello and welcome everybody. Thanks for coming to the You Win or You SciPy BOF. So this is a little untraditional as BOFs go. So the way this is going to work is it's going to be a panel discussion between Andy, myself, and Katie, and Matt McCormick here. It will be our fearless leader and moderator. So the idea behind this panel discussion is that there are many things that we do wrong in the SciPy ecosystem, and we don't really have a place to discuss those. So this is going to be a venue for discussing what's wrong and a venue for discussing what we can do to fix those things and how to make progress. So there will be 3 topics today. The first one, we changed up the order, is the, is Python death scenarios, which is Andy's going to be the champion of that one. So we'll spend Andy will give a couple slides and make sort of a statement, and we'll have a discussion that'll last around 10 minutes. And then if there are questions from the audience, we have a mic, and we'll have about 5 minutes or so, maybe a little less, where the mic can be run around, and we'll have short discussions about questions. The second topic will be diversity, which will be championed by Katie Huff here. And then we'll do the same deal, 15 minutes sort of total overall, although we're starting a little late, so I might shorten that. And then finally, the last topic will be championed by me, which is planning for Python's legacy, which I assure you is different than Python death scenarios. So with that, I'll let Matt will go ahead and take the mic.
That one's not loud, is it? Okay, so this is a wild, hairy chase, and it's not meant to be completely serious. So if you see this video on the internet, please disregard it. Okay, so the question was, how do we evolve as a community? And one thing a community should always do is think about how they're going to die. And so when thinking about how we're going to die, I like to read Hacker News, because it likes to tell me that Python is going to die every day. Except today, where it said that we're living past everybody else, and all the schools are going to teach Python as introductory programming, which I've taught introductory programming, and I know that's where languages go to die. So I thought it would be fun to think a little bit about how we're going to die. And I have 3 reasons, and I'll just flip through them, and then I'll talk a little bit more. First one is language feature parity. Are we keeping up with the Joneses? Next is community dispersion. Are we separating our concerns too much? And last one, are we too popular? Do we get too many people that we can't support? So, all right, language feature parity is probably our most fun. Language bashing wars and all that jazz. So here's are at least 3 languages that I like different features from. So Go handles asynchronous well, and it's very fast. And everyone says you can port from Python to Go in an afternoon. So they've stolen our wonderful typing, our wonderful expressivity and everything like that, but made it fast and made it asynchronous. How many people think they need asynchronousness in their computer? How many people know what asynchronous means? Okay, at least more hands went up there. So if you don't know much about asynchronous computing, check it out. The biggest take home from that is when you have an asynchronous system, you can do a lot of parallelism very easily. And you can expose your execution paradigm a little bit more fully. And Go has several libraries that do that already. The second one is Julia is fabulous, so the internet tells me. So Julia is kind of the new darling of all scientific computing. It's supposed to solve all our problems, and since Jeff and Stefan aren't here this year, I get to bash it. Now I invited them to do the Julia tutorial, so we're good. But they have things like multiple dispatch, which if you download Mac Rockland's great multiple dispatch library, you have it too in Python. They have a great informed type system. Python has at least 6 different type systems, whether you spell that as traits or NumPy dtype or Blaze dshape or so on and so forth. Julia's interop is amazing. The fact that you can very easily call R and Java and all sorts of these weird languages, they really took that interop very seriously, although we don't do that necessarily in R. Python's great interop, but it's not nearly as fantastic as Julia. And indexes start from 1. And then Rust and D are evolved replacements for C++, and we use a lot of C++. So if we don't keep up with that, we could very well die. And Java, and we don't support mobile. All right, I got the hurry up from Spider, so I better hurry up. The second one is Python's dispersion. So we have too many plotting libraries. We have too many ways to hit big data architectures. And we have too many companies creating solutions outside of the community. So, and this is something that I'm highly aware of, being now an industry person myself, is making sure that anything that we create in industry can live on in our community and we can grow it as a community together. The final one is we're too popular. So this one is the most fun because ACM tells us all the undergrads in the world are now using our language, so all the core devs have to learn how to speak to people, which is not something core devs like to do. So we will eventually crush under our own weight and have to, out of fear of supporting a API by mob mentality. And I submit that for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And Anthony, will you tell Andy what's wrong with what he just said? Which is very good.
Well, so I guess I wanted to talk about the competition from other languages in context of this. So it seems like that is probably the greatest threat right now, at least from where I sit. I mean, you feel free to disagree, but in the research groups that I'm a part of, it's hard to, even though some of the people are very pro-Python, it's very hard to convince the project to be Python-centric or completely Python or pure Python. And it seems like every 2 weeks or 2 months, there's another like, well, why don't we just rewrite the whole code base in Rust or something? And you know that might be fun, but it's certainly not doable in the long term. So I don't know how long C++ is going to live, and maybe that's something that should have died a long time ago. But
forever is the answer to that.
Yeah.
C is living forever. It will live forever.
I mean, yeah, maybe, but like, how does Python and the scientific Python community fit into that is the big question to me. So
the answer to that is this community is what keeps the languages alive. This community moves very, once it's moved, it doesn't move very fast often. Right? You look at Fortran, it's still with us. I grew up writing Fortran 4. Fortran 77 was the new kid, and it took us 10 years to get there. The science community, once they're on something, stays. Python's not going to die, at least in this community, for years and years and years.
Just to repeat the statement for the video, the statement was about community and how important that is to prevent the death of the project.
Right. So the scientific community is a vital community and sticks with things for good reasons for long periods of time because they work. Python is going to be extremely strong in this community for a long, long time. They're not going to move to fads like Go, particularly when good enough solutions show up. So the death of Python, I think, is prematurely noted.
Thank you.
I mean, that may be true, but I feel like well, no, so like I feel uncomfortable calling Go a fad at this point. I don't think it's a fad. I think there's real competition there. It wasn't all that long ago that we were not the established scientific computing language or one of the blessed scientific computing languages, and so I can see a scenario in which another language comes and usurps us very quickly.
I would compare Python versus Ruby versus Python versus Go.
Comparing Python to Ruby is a good example of a fad language that's come and has stuck itself in the web community. Python has shown the strength of expanding beyond communities. and it's shown very much by being a place where people do real work in science, they have made themselves much stronger than Ruby as a platform. And I believe it's growing faster than the Ruby platform, because that's a balkanized or little group of people. Go was designed by our friends at Google to do web development.
We can't bash languages. We're not going to bash languages
here.
Oh,
I'm bashing communities, dude. I'm bashing communities.
To add to that a little bit, the question or a different response to that is maybe we're asking the wrong question, and why are we worrying about other programming languages competing with us, and how are we not interoperating with other programming languages, because that has really been Python's strength, and are we not interoperating with these other upcoming languages that do have purpose and value?
So there's a question back there, but I want to respond to how aren't we not interoperating with other languages. So working in the data science world, it's the JVM. We can interoperate. Anybody who wants to pretend, if there's a C VM, we can participate with that very easily. But the Java world, we have to serialize our data through there. We have to do all sorts of sick tricks to actually call Java in a real way. And the Hadoop and big data architectures and data science that wants to move to that architectures, we have a real hard time interoperating with very well.
Are there any other comments? Katie, maybe the other comments?
This guy had a question back there.
I just have a question about one of the slides, which was in the Julia feature set, there was a very conspicuously missing feature there.
There's a missing feature of Julia.
Macros. It's a cornerstone of Julia. It's a gaping hole in Python. Don't get me wrong, I'm not bashing Python. I love it. I program it every day. I will for until I'm dead.
So the comment is,
but macros, once you've had them, it's hard to go back.
Or you've had a memory leak.
So the question is, where are macros in Python? And
yeah, so where are macros in Python? That's a good death scenario. That's one of the missing features from the slides. So
Death scenario, but
yeah, but in the Julia death scenario.
Pointed out more as a key feature of Julia.
That's right. So the comment is, in the Julia death scenario, macros are missing from the Julia feature set. The thing that I think is, and since I have this microphone, the thing that I would comment on is that this death by popularity, I think it doesn't hold water. I think I'm just going to call you out on that whole slide. I understand that there are reasons where it might discourage some devs, but death by popularity doesn't sit with me. The distributed part maybe, but.
So the number one way to make sure your project can never innovate is have users. I believe very strongly that the most innovative projects don't try to have users for at least 10 years.
Yeah.
And so if you look at Java today, everybody says let's use Scala or Clojure or something else. They can't throw out Java, but they all agree that the Java standard library is too big and too cumbersome to actually even to manage and teach, which is crazy because it was a really good teaching language 15 years ago.
I actually think that is true in any community that's not willing to break backwards compatibility, but like, you know, we have Python 3. And like, just wait till Python 4.
So, I guess the thing I wanted to ask about was that Python doesn't have any idea of typing. We end up making our code safe by just writing exhaustive unit tests. I would like a better situation of like some sort of optional typing, or is there some way of not just counting on hoping my tests catch when I break my code?
Go to the Python 3 BOF and learn about type annotations. So there are things coming.
I'm implementing the Python 3 BOF this afternoon at 5:30 here.
Thank you. And one of the things that we have scheduled for discussion is like how we can best use function annotations.
So next topic, that was very good, is going to be diversity in the SciPy community, in the ecosystem. And Katie Huff, who's a very interesting person, is going to appropriately lead this next. Start it off and get you thinking. So.
That's very sweet, Spider.
How did you get the name Spider?
We were on a train.
A diverse person.
We were on a train to PyCon. Okay, it worked a second ago, but
Maybe you just want to talk about.
There we go.
Here we are. I'm going to mirror some displays real fast. So, one of the
I think it's an arrangement.
Yeah, it's the worst. Okay. Ding. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is attracting diversity. So I think a number of people here could look around and see that SciPy maybe has a slight diversity dearth. So we're not talking about the death of SciPy anymore. Now it's the dearth of diversity in SciPy. I was asked to give this last night, so I've just had some thoughts brewing in the back of my mind for the last lifetime. Basically, I'm going to introduce to you something you may have heard about before is intersectionality. So I think SciPy has an intersectionality problem. This is a problem in which you have two competing diversity issues. So intersectionality is this notion that for a diverse group that falls into two, for a certain social group that falls into two categories that are like systematically oppressed or systematically like socially stereotyped, that group of people has like double compounded problems in a community. So for us, I showed you this Venn diagram that I should have spoken about, but there's women up there at the top. Sorry, it's so small. Women is that top circle, science is the green circle, and Python is the blue circle. And, between women and science, you have like Marie Curie, right? She was a science lady. Between women and Python, you have people like Lynn Root, who, she has a business degree, but she's good at Python, so, but she's not interested really in, she's interested in science, but she's not a scientist fundamentally. And in between, you're gonna have people. Oh, sorry, Lorena's supposed to be in the middle. Actually, so Lorena is in the middle of Python and science, right? That place. But she's also supposed to be a woman, so she's supposed to be in that dark little bit. I maybe made this an hour ago. So in any case, there's this intersectionality where the feature by which you are both a rainbow and a unicorn. In this community, you have all of the features of social discrimination or social privilege because of your rainbowness, and also the same features because of your unicornness. But adding these two things in a linear combination isn't the same as having the experience of a rainbow unicorn, actually. And you can see this because in science, science in general has something like 20% women. And computing in industry has something like 20% women, right? But SciPy does not have something like 20% women, right? They compound each other in a way that you have to consider the experience of the rainbow unicorn. And I'm not just talking about women and diversity. I'm talking about brown people and blue people and vegans and carnivores and bisexuals and lesbians and gay people. And so this is the full definition from Wikipedia. The original example was black feminism, but we're going to go to rainbow unicornism. It's the study of intersections between these forms and systems of oppression, where you have an experience that's being a rainbow unicorn that's it's not the combination, it's the compounding situation. So in SciPy we have this problem. Both science and computing, which each have their own individual problems with diversity for underrepresented groups, minorities, women, etc., vegans, they compound each other to this more ill effect where you have very low numbers in contributors to scientific Python projects. Not to mention attendance to the conference, which I would take as a proxy for the number of women who contribute to scientific Python projects. We look around and we're very excited to have probably something like maybe 10% this year. We haven't counted, but something like that. So I'm going to give you a suggestion and that's the item for discussion. It's basically, I think that we need new developers to join in, and you can do as much targeting as you like, but really the first step to getting diversity is to really reach out to as many new developers as possible and cast a very wide net. And I suggest that we lower the barrier to entry, but not the standards, because that's offensive, okay? All you have to do is make it more straightforward to contribute, and more people will be able to do that. They'll have the time, right? They'll have the clarity of problem to know how to contribute. There's a social scientist, he does social psychology, his name's Claude Steele, and he wrote a book called Whistling Vivaldi, and it's about stereotype threat. I won't go into it, but basically the best way to encourage people to do something while they are under the threat of reinforcing a negative stereotype about their social group is to say, we have really high standards here, but I also think you can meet them, right? And this does two things. It assuages this fear that you're being a token woman, a token vegan, and it suggests that there's also confidence that you won't reinforce the negative stereotype about your social group. To do this, I suggest many things, mostly just to encourage new developers writ large, and the diversity will come with that, I think. All projects should have instructions on the website about how to become a new developer. Those projects should have comprehensive documentation and an accessible list host where even brand new people can post on the list host, even if you don't know them. The expectations for contributing should be really clearly defined. Low-hanging fruit items that you can work on, issues in GitHub, should have a tag that's like easy thing, new thing that we really need that's like less than an hour. Low-hanging fruit doesn't necessarily mean easy, by the way. I misspoke. It should mean like short. And give permissions to that repository as soon as you think someone's going to be a contributor. I think that people overestimate the possible danger of giving permission to people. And if you don't assign issues to your developer group, if your issues sit around unassigned, even if someone is working on them, people are gonna be afraid to like start working on that issue because they know that you have a culture of not saying when someone's working on an issue. So there's a feature in GitHub that says, I'm working on this. Use it so that developers aren't afraid they're gonna be stepping on someone's toes. This is like, it should be very straightforward. Harder suggestions include having sprints that are targeted at specific, social groups, or just really well curated sprints in general. Appointing an ambassador to, if for your code project, encourage new people to join. That person can still be a developer and just have this like side project. Mentoring users directly. As soon as you see a user that has a skill set that might contribute, actually going out and contacting them. Consider conferences that are more friendly to users than just developers. So that's all I've got.
We good?
Sorry, it's Colin.
Thank you, Charity. Are there any unicorns we need?
Yeah, so I'll out myself as the lone vegan on the stage. So I think most people agree with the broad strokes of this, right? And the implementation is really the hard part here. And something that I've thought and worried a lot about is this notion of microaggressions, if you've heard of that. So for people who, just by show of hands, is everyone familiar with that term? Like, okay, so no. That's when you say or do things that aren't meant as hurtful or discriminatory, and they're really innocuous to people, but the targeted group might feel hurt or singled out by this. Like, I think this was made popular in Japan, where there's some Westerners who went over and they noted that like people would make fun of them because they were tall, not because they were Western or whatever. But it was this like microaggression idea, and I think we need to start. It's a fine line, but doing something to let people know and become aware of when they're involved in these microaggressions, and getting those to stop would go a long way to make our community as positive as possible. I don't think our community is negative in any way, or in those ways, but it's a sort of personal responsibility, and if you see other people doing it, we could call them out on it, but not in a overbearing way either. It's a really weird place. So,
Andy, do you have any response, or is there any other
Oh, so I guess my big response there is that helping communities understand what they need to do to be more encompassing, to lower barriers of entry, is really important. I remember Andreas Sertek, who's not here today, but he's very good at inviting people to the community. He'll make videos. He'll write documentation that's like how to use Git for somebody who's never used Git. It helps that he was a high school student when he started doing all this stuff and had no idea, and he lived in the Czech Republic and he didn't speak English very well. Sorry, Andre. And so like he was somebody who came from a community that wasn't very well represented. I think there's, structurally we can ask organizations like NumFocus or other organizations to go out and start to show the best out there. And if a project comes under some umbrella, or have umbrellas that the projects can come under, where we have people who will take a wider view of different projects and try to create a checklist of like, here's the things you need to do to actually encompass diversity in your project. And I think that I would happily accept your contributions to the NumFocus organization to head that venture up. Anyways.
Yeah, so I guess kind of sliding backwards slightly, but I think maybe somebody else can comment on this more than I think it was Hacker School or something, where they like banned the notion of feigned surprise. So if somebody says, and then you say to them like, oh, you didn't know about blah, 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 and then it makes people not want to talk anymore. But I feel like that kind of problem is pretty widespread, certainly in computing in general, but maybe also here if you're talking about a very specific method or something you're trying to work on, or you implement something in a naive way and then like, oh, you don't know about cache lines or something, and then at that point the conversation is dead and people don't want to help anymore. But I think a second problem that was addressed by your idea of the low-hanging fruit. I think there's more to it than just saying like this is a quick thing to work on. I think it's important to establish that you can work on this even if you don't know what you're doing yet. Because I think for me at least, that was the barrier when I started. It wasn't that I wanted something small. It was that I felt like if I work on this and put it out there, everyone's going to look at it and it's going to be totally obvious that I have no idea what I'm doing. And then it's never going to make it in any way, and there won't be constructive feedback because everyone's really busy, and so I might as well just wait for them to patch it, which is going to take them 3 seconds.
So to your first point, Greg Wilson likes to say this thing when he instructs software carpentry instructors, that the worst thing that you can say is, you just do this, right? Like that's, because that's really problematic for people who are coming to things new. So.
Another one to add to that feigned surprise, I've worked in a lot of communities where they outlaw sarcasm. And that wouldn't work very well with us. But
really?
but sarcasm's another one of those little tipping points where you can really offend somebody who's not in the code or in the jargon and knows that that's sarcastic. So
I have a quick thing to your second point too about low-hanging fruit. I agree entirely. And another thing I really meant to add during that section was that it is definitely the job of the developers, if they want new developers to join in, to break large tasks down into smaller tasks in a way that only they know how, right? If your issue is so big that you're going to spend 3 weeks on it, 0 people are going to jump in. So break them down until they are low-hanging fruit. Like, this is possible, actually. And especially if there are things that you won't break, you should say, if you work on this, you're not going to break it. Yeah.
Cool.
Which was my
All right, thank you. So maybe one more comment, and then we'll move on to the next topic.
So I'm one of these people that was in the young geek programmer phase. I'm now in the old geek programmer phase, and I've become a unicorn, okay? And there is a deep bias over in the IT side against people with gray hair. Yeah. And what I've taken away from this is that I have to reach out to this community to break through their perception that I'm a unicorn. I also have to find all the other unicorns and help them. So for example, in the Austin Python user group, I lead the Pythonic Lightning Talk activity, which is focused on small talks about mundane things like argparse, like generator functions, things that anyone can talk to. I also make an explicit choice to find all the women in APUG because I have a daughter, and make sure that they all know each other so they can support each other. In fact, I'll buy any woman an APUG lunch and have my daughter go with her. Okay. But those are things that I think unicorns need to address to change the culture. I found that when I grew into this problem, I've been embraced by this culture in this community by reaching out the other direction.
So that was going to be my question about how you felt SciPy was different from the IT community.
I'm totally.
All right.
Excellent, thank you. So next up, we're going to finish with planning for Python's legacy. And Anthony Scopatz is going to expose to us what is Python's legacy and why we should be concerned about it.
So this will be a little shorter, but the title here was named by Matt Rocklin when we were discussing this a couple days ago, or yesterday. And what the topic is, sort of the statement I want to make, is that we now have a problem in this community with older codes that are somewhat central to parts of the ecosystem. And in general, we almost explicitly, in terms of Fortran codes and things like that, and interoping there, dealing with legacy software. And what do we do as a community when all of the main developers, all the original developers go away, but this piece of code needs to stay alive? So as a case study in this, one that I'm personally involved in and sort of motivated some of this, but I've seen it happen elsewhere, is PyTables. So I'm a PyTables developer, maintainer. There's a few others of us. The original developer, Francesco Alted, he left a few years ago to go on to greener pastures, and he comes back in occasionally and helps out. But in the meantime, we've had to do a lot of work. Python 3 became something that we needed to target. Pandas picked us up as an optional dependency, and just maintaining that project at a consistent level to the point where it can remain a dependency of some larger projects has been challenging for 4 people on 4 continents with minimal time otherwise. So I wanted to open that up and maybe think about what we can do, and are there ways to pool resources, maybe through an umbrella organization, and get more support for some of these projects that are on their way to that point. PyTables is 12 years old, by the way, now.
So Andy, do you have any thoughts about any organizations, maybe projects like NumPy or SciPy?
Yeah, I think that working to make our documentation actually usable is a huge deal. I think that even if a project dies, if it's well documented and it's well understood what's happening, you can at least have 4 people pick it up. I certainly have codes that weren't picked up after I had to leave. And so that aspect of it is one way we prepare for, legacy code use.
I would just make the distinction between developer docs and user docs.
Yeah, so just to make the distinction between user docs and developer docs, they're 2 very different things. And you want developer docs for maintenance, right?
You want both.
Oh, absolutely, but user docs are not enough.
And documentation is good, but you also have to have a way to get keys to the castle too, right? So.
Yeah, that's right. So the thing I was sort of thinking about is people sort of need to make it clear when they're on their way out of a project what the transition is going to be. In the same enthusiasm that you start a project, you should sort of save a little of that for the end of your involvement in those projects. And so, there's more legacy type code would benefit a lot from that transition moment if people could guide it a little better.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think almost from the moment you become the leader of a code project, you should be figuring out who your replacement is going to be. And maybe you don't find them for a few years, but you need to be thinking about it. And to date, I don't think that's really happened on a lot of projects in this community. And when that lead developer disappears or goes away or abdicates, it's been kind of rough. So, yeah.
I don't think this has happened in a lot of open source projects full stop so far, just because, I mean, a lot of the high profile projects, the maintainers have stuck with it and are still alive. I think it's going to start becoming a much bigger problem as, sooner or later people pass on.
Yeah. I disagree. I think everybody in this room, like the projects in this room, that represent in this room, it has happened to. But you look at like Bazaar, or like even the support of Launchpad, or support of. I mean, there's a whole ton of tools that, as you've stuck around and see these tools come up and see them disappear, that aren't around anymore, and it is a real problem where things go away. I think we were talking about the OpenSSL community here, and they just happened to be in a case where they didn't die because everybody was depending upon them. And imagine if it wasn't the case, they shared everybody's password in the entire world, then nobody would know that it's a dying community.
There wasn't anything successful
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's probably true.
So I spent a couple of years in the Washington area as a program manager at OSCAR, Advanced Scientific Computing Research. And the good news is, there are really smart people who understand this problem, who talk about this problem. The issue for them, well, at least in mine, an organization called Advanced Scientific Computing Research, software sustainability is not a research area, right? But that doesn't mean, what that means is the money they currently get is hard to allocate for that kind of thing. But they do have conversations with people on the science committees for Congress and so forth, and they could push these ideas back up to ultimately obtain funding for this. I think this is going to become critical in the next few years, not just in Python, but in a lot of areas. And so I guess what I would say is, if you're the type of person who might interact with a program manager from time to time, let them know what the sustainability software issues are, what packages are threatened, and so forth. Because the more examples they have, the better case they can make.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And in fact, in the PyTables case specifically, almost immediately after that happened, we tried to get discretionary funds to do some support, and it was very, very difficult, and it didn't end up happening. I don't think we'd have a problem staffing these sustainability efforts, but there needs to be, but we're not getting external funding right now.
To highlight this conversation, the workshop on sustainable software something practice and experience to WISPy is happening on Thursday afternoon. I really recommend, if you're really interested in sustaining the software ecosystem, we have an NSF program manager who will be here, who's one of his pet projects is making sure that we sustain projects and programs. So.
Yeah, and maybe all we need is a coordinated face for that.
Dan Katz is pretty good face.
Yeah, he's a good face.
Are there any other comments?
I think my comment is pretty short. I mean, I guess the only thing I would point out is that there are a lot of projects that die on the vine, and a lot of them probably should die on the vine, and we need to figure out when is it best to just, okay, let's just leave it, let it die, because there's something better that's replaced it. And that's oftentimes for people who are, the one developer left who's really passionate about it, or the two, to sort of recognize, oh, okay, we're a dinosaur, we need to sort of move on. And it's hard to figure that out, but I'm just saying that there are projects like that.
Popping the stack one element, I wanted to make another comment on when he mentioned that sustainability is not a research topic. Why isn't it? It might belong more in social science departments, but why aren't we thinking about how to make things more sustainable, and are there even technical tools we can build to make it easier to sustain things going forward as people change?
So I will introduce Bill to James Hedderson, who will be here later. This Howison. Okay, it's James. I think Hedderson is James Howison's advisor. These people exist, they're rare. But James Howison, who lives in the I school right across the street, that's basically his topic of discussion here at research. So.
Okay, we have time for another few comments.
Yes, probably time.
Any other comments?
There's also someone named Catherine Carson at Berkeley who's doing the social science.
Could you speak up a little bit?
There's also someone named Catherine Carson at Berkeley.
We're in Texas, not California.
Who's doing some social science analysis of open source communities and sustainability and stuff about those things.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're out of time then, but thank you everybody for coming and participating, and thanks to Anthony for starting this conversation.